This is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, thank you for tuning in. 25 minutes before 11 o'clock, and every time you turn the news on, pretty much, there is a story about some kind of a trial, and quite often the jury is the news item, the jury that has to be protected, the jury that people don't agree with, the jurors themselves that make the news or write books or all kinds of things, and I've heard this. I don't know if you all will agree with this, and I don't even know that I agree with it, but I've heard that while the jury system may not be perfect, it is better than anything else we've ever tried to do as a way to figure out who is and who is not guilty. And we have this huge story from here in Central Florida, the Groveland Four, of the four young black men who were sentenced for raping a woman who they didn't rape. And that's just a blemish on the jury system that we have here. So it's not perfect, and sometimes it does seem to lean in one direction or another. So there's a book I want you to know about. It's called The Jury Crisis. It is currently #1, by the way, on Amazon in the category of juries. It's also on the list. Let's see, it just came out today. Oh, today's the first day. Wow. Cool. It's #10 under the jury category, #53 in the trial practice, and #160 in civil procedure. Those are all good numbers on Amazon when you realize there are millions of books to be rated. Dr. Drury R. Sherrod is the author of the book, and he's on the phone. He's a social psychologist. He's been involved in hundreds of real and mock trials. He's the co-founder of Mattson and Sherrod, one of the leading jury research firms in America. Let's say good morning. What's wrong with jury trials and how we can save them? The Jury Crisis, again, is the title of the book. Dr. Sherrod, it's an honor to have you on our show. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm happy to be there.
Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I'm in Pasadena, California.
Oh, my gosh. Well, thank you for getting up early to be with us today.
Oh, it's nice.
So is there a crisis that implies that we may see the end of the jury system?
Yeah, let me address that by actually challenging one of the things you said in your introduction.
Okay.
And you said you hardly turn the radio on without hearing about a new trial. It's the crisis is that there are very, very few new trials going on in America anymore. So trial by jury is guaranteed in the 6th and 7th Amendment to the U.S. Constitutions. But currently, we're witnessing the death of trial by jury in America. There are phenomena called the vanishing jury, the disappearing jury, but it's the death of trial by jury. The actual statistics are less than 1% of all the criminal and all the civil cases filed in a year ever reach a jury. Less than 1%. That's down from 20, 25%, 30% in decades earlier.
So
there's a real crisis there.
As a layperson just hearing this for the first time, I'm going to take a guess, and you tell me how off I am or how on I am if I am. I'm guessing a lot of it has to do with persuasion by the law enforcement, by the attorneys who are working the case themselves. Am I right?
You mean a lot of the fact that there aren't many jury trials?
Yeah, are they steering their clients away from a jury so that they can have plea deals, that kind of thing?
Yeah, what's happening is in criminal cases they're almost all plea bargaining, and in civil cases they are settled by the litigants before it goes to a jury trial, or they are dismissed by the judge upon summary judgment, or we resort to ADR, which is called Alternative Dispute Resolution. So the case is handed over to mediators, arbitrators, and hired private judges.
And are the court systems doing this? Are they part of the problem, or is it a problem? And is it because of money?
I think there's a tendency among judges, especially federal judges, to want to manage cases to settlement rather than manage them to trial by jury.
Okay.
And Larry had that story yesterday in the news about that fellow that raped and he abused 40 teenage girls, and he's only going to get 13 months in prison because of the plea deal. How does that sit with the families? They must think that they really haven't gotten justice.
Well, but the root of all this is just mistrust of the jury system. Why would somebody plea bargain, confess to a lesser offense in order to get a shorter sentence, unless they distrust the jury and they're afraid the jury might, in fact, award them much longer sentence? And the same thing can be said about all these alternative to jury trials for civil cases instead of alternative dispute resolution. I mean, clearly jurors aren't trusted. The majority of people think of juries as the kind of ludicrous trials we see on TV, as hung juries, mistrials,
right?
Something as ludicrous verdicts. Like I seldom work with lawyers when they don't mention the McDonald's coffee case. That's 25 years ago now, back when coffee cost 49 cents a cup.
Right.
But that's where a woman awarded civil damages of $2.7 million because she spills a cup of hot coffee in her lap.
Okay,
So,
but
one of those cases, everybody was.
so even though that was a long time ago, we do know that story, and that is used a lot. Yeah, so that's why we're afraid of juries, that kind of thing.
That is. Yeah, the runaway jury. You know, there's even the popular book, The Runaway Jury.
Okay, so the part of the subtitle is how we can save them, because I've always felt like a jury trial is probably a good thing, but I can imagine a person who's you know you're guilty or not. So the person on trial knows, or the person who's facing charges knows. And I think maybe that's part of it too. If you think you're if you know you're not guilty of something, and you have an attorney telling you, look, if you go to trial, they could put you in jail for 20 years, but if we plea bargain, it can only be a year. It might only be a year. Maybe that's part of the problem too.
Yeah, I think that's essentially the root cause. That we don't trust juries. You don't trust juries' verdicts. Jurors it's too easy to imagine the runaway jury, the ludicrous verdicts.
So what is the, like, for example, when
well, I was just going to say,
when a jury is assembled, when a jury is assembled, it is handpicked by the two attorneys that represent the two sides of a case. Is there something that needs to be fixed in that process?
Well, that process is called voir dire, which is Old French for to see and to hear. That's when the attorneys and the judges talk to the jurors and ask them questions about their biases.
Okay, and is that...
the problem probably is...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
There are so many people who show up. If you're going to try to win the case at jury selection, it's very difficult because there's a limited number of people out there. And the judges can strike some of them for cause by having people admit they're holding biases. They can strike some of them for peremptory strikes just because they don't like them. And they have a limited number of peremptory strikes. So you don't really have that much control over who sits on your jury. You have more control over how you manage the evidence, how clear the judge's instructions are, how the jurors are instructed to deliberate.
When the
jury selection.
Oh, go ahead.
What I just said, jury selection is the sort of high drama, glamorous part that you see, for example, on the Dr. Bull TV show.
When the jury goes out to deliberate a case, do they talk about things about the case other than what is brought up during the trial?
You know, that is such a good question. There's a lot of research on that. And what's really staggering is that the research shows that almost half of what juries talk about during deliberations was never mentioned as evidence. It was never mentioned in the trial. In fact, when juries deliberate, when they try to understand what's going on, they first begin telling a story about what they believe happened, and it occurs early in the opening statements before they've ever heard any evidence. And so jurors hear the case and start thinking about similar situations from their own background. And this is called evoking stored scripts. So you have a narrative lurking in your head, and when you hear about a case, you start mapping your narrative onto that case. And then later on, when you retire to deliberate, you already have your mind made up before you've heard the evidence, and afterwards after you've heard the evidence. So you haven't budged. You
think that's what happened in the Oj Simpson case, because that was so highly publicized from start to finish, that's one of the reasons that the people are kind of like disgusted with juries?
Well, the Oj case was interesting because I think the polls were 85% of African Americans thought that he was innocent. because of racist police in the LAPD and mishandling evidence. And there was 85% of black people thought that. There were 8 blacks on the jury. It's not hard to say it's going to be acquittal by noon, which is what I told my friends.
Oh, my.
So I think there it was just, yeah.
One of the
But
things.
even if, take the, go ahead.
Okay, let me just apologize. It sounds like there's a delay, and so that delay is causing us to talk over one another, and I don't want you to think we're being rude. I just wanted to apologize and explain so you knew what that was. What I was going to say was based on some of the information that was sent to us to prepare us for the interview, and it says that almost half of what the jurors talk about during deliberations were never mentioned in the trial. How is that possible that they're talking about stuff that wasn't in the trial?
Well, that's the point I was trying to make about jurors basically don't decide on the evidence. They decide on stories. They make up stories. They create stories that make the evidence clear. And you can make a case here that the brain actually evolved to leap to conclusions, to act intuitively, and to tell stories right away instead of slowly and laboriously analyzing piece by piece of evidence. That's across the board, and jury trials are in real life.
See.
So if the brain evolves to these quick through storytelling, then we tell our stories instead of citing evidence.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, but that to me would scare me. If I had a choice, plea deal or a jury, I would hear that kind of a story and go for the plea deal.
Unless you had an attorney who actually knew how to organize the evidence into a narrative.
Yeah.
And that's part of the solution. That's part of how we save trial by jury, is training attorneys better.
So do you think we need different legislation? And if I could have a part 2 to that question, does each state or even maybe each district have their own laws that influence or affect the way a jury is conducted?
Well, the problem there is the way judges give instructions. Your question about different states have different, laws. The jury can be 6 people, 12 people. It can be required to have a majority decision, like 9 out of 12, or they all have to agree a consensus, 12 out of 12. Those kinds of things vary across cases and across the severity of the charge. But the judge's instructions are really crucial, and judges' instructions often just entirely over the heads of the jurors. The judges usually give instructions highly legalese. Can I just make one more? If you read about the El Chapo trial, the judge gave 3 hours of instructions. There were 3 months of testimony, 3 hours of instructions, and then the jurors were asked to deliberate, and there were 10 counts, 27 subcounts, an 8-page verdict form. They had to answer yes/no questions for 54 different questions. Now, that's a huge task for the average human brain to perform.
That is, yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to ask a question about the jury of our peers. A lot of times I don't see what looks like peers to me on a jury. When you see the makeup of a jury, the person on trial might be black and the whole jury is white. How is that the peers? That doesn't seem like a peer group to me.
One answer comes from that Trayvon Martin case, which is in your area.
Right.
He had come down from one county to another county to visit his dad and his dad's fiancée. And the county where his dad was living, I think, only had 11% African Americans. Where the county where he lived had a much higher percentage. But the trial was in his dad's county, and then many of the locals had been to demonstrations against the charges against Trayvon, and so they had been excluded because essentially they'd already taken positions in public by going to a demonstration or going to a discussion.
See, right
so
there.
Really, yeah, they started off with many fewer African Americans that would have been represented in the population at large there.
Yeah, that was a horrible misjustice too. I mean, I don't understand how they got onto the jury in the first place if they were involved in those demonstrations.
No, those are generally African Americans who were in pro-Trayvon demonstrations, so they were excluded. The problem there, I read a lot about it. One problem is that the people who were on the jury were very favorable to neighborhood watch committees, and they had spouses who had been on the committees. They were they owned guns. They believed you should carry guns for self-defense. And then in Florida, the Stand Your Ground law basically invites jurors to tell stories. It says something like, if you were in the shoes of the person who's making the accusation, would you have feared bodily harm, and that would have justified your use of deadly force?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Are people to think, well, yep.
Are there less people now becoming attorneys because there are so many plea bargains out there because they feel that's an injustice?
Well, there are lots of people out of law schools who aren't finding jobs at law firms, and that's part of this vanishing jury. I mean, there are even judges who are resigning because they're so bored. A federal judge in the Southern District of Manhattan said that just walking around the courthouse, she heard her footsteps echo on the marble floors. There's so few trials that I think if you take all the federal judges and district courts in America, there's fewer than 5 cases per year if you just distribute them all evenly across the 678 district judges.
So does it frustrate you when you're involved with the case as a litigation consultant? Is it frustrating to you when you see some of this stuff going on?
Let me just go back. You had one point earlier that links to this, and that's why juries don't look like a jury of one's peers. It's partly because the richest and the poorest actually don't show up. Poor people change their dresses too often. They can't afford not to go to an hourly wage job. They don't come to serve on juries. And rich people just can ignore it, and in most states you can get away with it pretty easily. Although in some states are beginning to link failure to show up for a jury summons with a stop if you're a traffic infraction. If you're stopped, the computer will show that you failed to show up for your jury summons. So that's one reason why they're not representative. And then also the system of strikes and peremptory strikes and cause strikes almost causes the jury to be resolved down to the middle, who seldom knows anything about a case. And then the other problem that happens once the case begins is just that information is presented in a way that doesn't respect the functioning of the human brain, that the brain looks for narratives. And we, in our company, we always said most lawyers have a yellow pad approach, and they'll just have a yellow pad with 100 items they'll just check off, as they'll say, and this witness will testify about that, and this witness will testify about that. And then it goes over people's heads.
The book implies that there's a problem and there's a way to fix it. What do you see for the future of the jury system in our country?
Well, the short-term fix, which is more possible, is actually training attorneys how to argue cases in more narrative terms. So instead of just dumping 100 bits of evidence, instead to tell it as a narrative. If you know that the jury is going to make up their mind during the opening statements, then you have to use the opening statements to tell a story that organizes all the evidence. Essentially, you're setting up mental file folders in the jury's head so that when they hear information, they can just file it right away. And they have a complete story in their head that has beginning, middle, and end, and each of those beginning, middle, and end sections has several subcategories, and this is how the brain is thinking, looking for a story and looking for premise, motive, implications.
Mm-hmm. And
one thing is training judges.
Oh, go ahead.
The other thing is judges, making the judges' instructions clear, moving judges' instructions from at the end of all the evidence to the beginning of the trial. I mean, now it's pretty bizarre. Judges' instructions are given before jurors retire, and that means the jurors have sat through the whole trial without knowing what they were looking for or why. Also, in most courts, jurors aren't allowed to take notes. They can't ask questions. It's a whole system that seems stacked against understanding the evidence in a way that matters.
Is it possible that the judge doesn't give instructions because even he doesn't really understand all the things about the case until it's done?
No, the judge should. The judge will have read lots of motions. The judge should have a pretty good understanding.
Yeah, you would think so,
system,
yeah.
Now, do you think, in your opinion, that because there are less jury trials, that this is what is motivating the bad guys to be more destructive, and they would much rather kill people than, as opposed, because they know, well, they're just going to get a plea deal down the road anyway, so they can do what they want to do? That must really frustrate law enforcement.
You know, my social psychologist side thinks that the bad guys don't stop and do a rational analysis before they kill somebody. That's all done sort of in the heat and passion and the emotion of the moment. So I kind of doubt that they're wondering about thinking, I can get away with this because of plea bargaining.
Oh,
Although
okay.
That's a nice, that's a story we can tell.
So do we have any pockets in the country that are doing it better than others?
Some states have better jury selection processes. most conservative states, you have to be a registered voter to be able to get into the jury pool. And that this replaced the key man system, which existed up until, I don't know, the 50s or so. Whereas New York has a system that's so inclusive that you can be a voter, you can be a property taxpayer, you can be receiving public assistance. It's a much wider net of casting people who will receive a jury summons, who'd have to show up. So you're more likely to be guaranteed a jury of your peers there. In terms of judges' instructions, attorney training, I think that doesn't vary. There aren't good pockets. I don't think it varies across states.
Do you think that because the jury members are so visible to the attorneys in the very beginning that some people would think it would be more fair if the people that are being considered to be on the jury would be in a separate room and all you hear are their voices and not see them physically?
I don't think so. I think attorneys have a myth that they're going to win the case by making jurors like them. So there are some attorneys who have techniques from the very beginning to make sure that there are certain judges, certain jurors they make eye contact with and speak to, and they'll try to pick out who's going to be the leader in this trial, and then focus on that juror a lot when they're making arguments, and especially if they think the juror is connecting with them.
The book is doing really well, so I want to make sure our listeners know about the book that we're focusing on today. It's called The Jury Crisis: What's Wrong with Jury Trials and How We Can Save Them. It is written by our guest, Dr. Drury Sherrod, and he's out in Pasadena, I think you said, right? Says I found the book on Amazon. Do you have a different website you want to direct us to?
I have a web page which will redirect them to Amazon. The web page is just thejurycrisis.com. They can get that and read more information about the book, and then they can click on the Buy Now, which will take you right to Amazon.
And today is the release day, right?
Today is, yes.
Wow, it's already number...
The day after my birthday.
Well, happy birthday.
Well, thank you for doing this. So are you... is the book in part... grown from frustrations you felt in your work?
It really is. Over the years, 30 years of being a jury consultant, I have written hundreds of opening statements for lawyers, which a lawyer gives before the case happens, and I organize around narratives. And then it's very hard to find a lawyer who can actually do it on his or her own. That while they might agree and understand the importance of narratives, they have a very hard time doing it because lawyers believe in evidence and the brain seeks narratives.
Well, this is a conversation, obviously, that goes farther than what we were able to do on a radio interview, but thank you for giving us a little sample of what this is about, and opening our eyes on a few things, too. I'm 64. I've only been called for jury duty one time, and I think you just helped me understand why. I would have thought I'd be called all the time. Mm-hmm. How many times have you been called?
Twice.
Robin's been called twice.
Yeah.
Well, you probably think you were... would have been an opinion leader and a wild card because you're educated and articulate, and then jurors might have looked to you instead of thinking about the evidence. They're often afraid of a sort of smart, articulate person who might run away with the jury and direct the jury in ways that the lawyers don't have access to.
Oh, my.
Oh, you just made my head get big. I'm going to keep that one. All right. I'm going to use that one, Doctor. Thank you again for being on the air with us today. Have a good weekend.
Great question. I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Bye.
Come to the 6th Annual Habitat Strawberry Festival on March 2nd, 2019 at the McPherson Government Complex. The festival will have vendors, food, a car show, a kids zone, live entertainment, pie eating contests, and all things strawberry. All to also raise funds to build a habitat home for a family in our community. Check out the website, habitatocala.org, and follow the link. The Habitat for Humanity Strawberry Festival is March 2nd with breakfast served at 7:30. Free admission, $5 parking. See you there.
Hello, gorgeous.
Hi, this is Becky at Hello Gorgeous Salon. It's time to get that new look started. Let's get rid of those sun-damaged ends and faded out color and get into something rich and vibrant. Humidity is not your hair's friend. It causes your hair to capture moisture and leaves it looking dry and unhealthy. Hello Gorgeous is a certified Brazilian blowout salon. We can tame those locks, leaving your hair healthy and shiny with a Brazilian smoothing treatment. So let us help you make a great first impression. Call us today to set your appointment at Hello Gorgeous. Our number is 352-351-5358. Again, that's 352-351-5358. And don't forget, we also do men and children's cuts too. 351-5358. Hello Gorgeous is conveniently located in the heart of downtown Ocala. So call today and set up your appointment at Hello Gorgeous Salon at 351-5358. That's 351-5358.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News, I'm Jane Metzler.
This is nothing more than a character assassination.
Congressman